Hello, my name is Adam Bean and welcome to Live Hacking as wished. So I was invited by Java, and this is a Brazilian Java user group to show some lightweightness in 2019. And yeah, I had already contact with the Java man and recorded an episode of a podcast. So if you're interested, it's called the Java Man. And this, of course, Bruno Souza, also one of the, I would say, somehow known person of Sujava. Bruno looks like a little bit like a Superman because he's always, how to call it here, it's like a, it looks like, how to tell it. So you will recognize him. And this is the podcast called Airhacks FM. So if you're interested, the episode 20 is with Bruno. So what I will use in my in this session, I wanted to say in my project is a tool I've wrote is Watch and Deploy, and I actually used that yesterday on 2 Java conferences in Germany, and people ask me, what is it and what it does, and this is, I would say, the most primitive deployment tool you can build. And to start with some code, this is actually the code from What. You can find it on my GitHub, and it comprises basically 2 parts. This is a folder watch service. It polls the whole folder in 500 milliseconds. If it finds changes, it invokes Maven with builder, and you see what happens behind the scenes is Maven clean package. So this is all it does, and I will use it in a second, so you can check out the code and or just download the jar as executable jar. So there's actually nothing to configure except you have to point to a deployment directory of a server. So this was What. This is Watch and Deploy, and there's of course a GitHub project with that. So okay, so we have that. Now, why What works so well? So I promised you not to use any slides, and so I won't use slides. What I would like to do is, where's my desktop? I would like to show you now. Just I need another screen. A Markdown file, which is the only slide I have today, and convention of a configuration. This is, for instance, why What can work. So what it means is, if I would start a project right now, and let's call it, I actually forgot to think, but I think, let's say, coffee could work. So then I would set up Jakarta EE project. So I was actually busy and created an archetype for Jakarta EE and call it coffee. So it happened yesterday in a train. And what happens now, it creates a coffee project. And if we will switch to the IDE and just load the project, reload the project, it just tries to find, all projects in the folder, and then you will see this. So what happens now, there are 2 dependencies. One is Jakarta 8 API, and the other one is Microprofile 3. So now, what you see here as well is the project name is coffee. The final name is coffee, no versions. There's no inheritance. And what I know right now already is that the output is going to be a coffee.war. So I can rely on it. So, and this is how What operates. It knows that it will build a project. It will find a war with the name of the folder. So don't make me think, right? And copy this to a given server. So therefore there is 0 configuration, which is really convenient. So this means if I will fire up now, wait a second, for instance, Payara. And by the way, if your Payara doesn't start, which happens to me at yesterday's conference, it might be the case that it collides with a screen sharing port, which in my case was activated by Skype because I had a session with my clients, and it conflicts with internal, how it's called, Hazelcast port. So now it worked. And what I would like to do is to run What. And what does is it was started in the project, so it finds the POM, it scans for changes, performs the initial build, and copies the WAR file to 4 servers on my machine. What are these servers? Is Whitefly, OpenLiberty, the Apache Tommy, and Payara. So I get a question to know what is the best one. Is hard to tell. They are all great. So really, it's not like, I think there are no more bad servers anymore. They are refined for years. So it's not like, 20 years ago it would be a different story, but now all servers are small, fast, and mature. Okay, nice. So what it already means is, let's try that. Without even thinking conventional configuration, I can say, give me please HTTP localhost, and okay, 8080 is almost a convention. Most of the servers, but not OpenLiberty, are doing this. Localhost 8080, then coffee and resources, and I think pink, because my resource is always pink, and it worked. So what it means is, if you have conventions, you can save a lot of time. This is even less ceremony involved, because think about that. If I would have to configure now properties and dependencies just to see something on screen, it would be a terrible experience. In Java EE or a microprofile will never take off. Okay, now having said that, I forgot an important point. Is time to hello world, or sometimes I call it time to first commit. So, and this is why I created the archetype, because without the archetype, I will have exactly remember all the dependencies here. So there are just 2, but it started with 1. So I started an archetype with Java 8. Now I have 2 dependencies, and but this is faster right now. So even if I have spare time, I'm in the airport or somewhere, or is a boring time somewhere, and I have 10 minutes of spare time, I can fire up the archetype and create a proof of concept and see whether something works. So this is what happens a lot. And without the archetype and without the automation or preparation, or if this would be this were more complicated, there would be no way for me to do something sensible. So I would say, if you evaluate that technology, time to first commit is very important. So the lower the time to first commit, the higher the acceptance in team, company, or whatever. And this is actually maybe one of the reasons why right now I'm working with lots of startups with this technology, Jakarta in Microprofile, and they really like it. And the reason is because it's simple, so they can immediately start. So not like they have to configure all the world or pull 35,000 npm dependencies just to see hello world on screen. So this is what happens. And by the way, what I usually do, I install Payara before, or the servers, with a simple script which actually comprises unzip, so which is really convenient. If you ask me questions, you can use my Twitter account, and there's already already the first mentioning from Elder Moraes, or use the built-in chat if you like. So ask whatever you like, and hopefully the questions will appear here. Okay, so now conventional configuration, hello world, and automations. What I usually do, I write small scripts. They are just trivial. For instance, what I did, set up Jakarta EE project, and if you take a look on that, if we just see what it actually is, then wait a second. So now it is just invokes the Maven archetype, which is stated on the on GitHub. It's exactly the same. What I did, I just prepared a parameter, and saves me each time, I would say, 10 seconds. Except if I start explaining what happens behind the scenes, it costs me half a minute. So but this would happen behind the scenes. So now we have the server, and now the question to know what to choose. So we have Jakarta 8 and Microprofile. So the truth is, all servers support both. So this is my default. So I think in recent 2 years I always use both together. For me, it doesn't make a lot of sense just to use Microprofile or Jakarta EE if the runtime support both. And but from the from the architectural perspective, it works like this: that some APIs from Jakarta EE are the base APIs like CDI, JAX-RS, so the RESTful services, JSON-P on JSON-B, and the other specifications come from Microprofile. and we will get probably, you know, 1 release a year, I think, from Jakarta. And we have already 4 releases a year in Microprofile. So, but what we can do, so we have the pink, but we actually need coffees. So what I would like to do is to create a coffee, and this is com airhex, let's say, Stardux, no, Stardux is a good name. And now let's say coffee boundary and coffee resource. I actually forgot to prepare. I have no idea what typical Brazilian coffee brands are, but I think, unfortunately, I don't think Java is Brazilian brand, but coffees. So let's do this, and just make it already a little bit more complicated to save time. So I would say, I think it's called or roaster. Roaster is good. And what I would like also have is a coffee, and this is going to be the entity, and the coffee has a name, and I think public is string or string boolean, whether it's just Arabica or a mix between Arabica and something else, Robusta, I think. So we have now 2 properties, so it looks good. And we have the roaster, and the roaster returns at least a coffee. So a coffee, roast, coffee, return new coffee. And the name is, I also forgot for Bruno the mascot. Had to look, let's see. So Java mascot. And this is, Eclipse Node.js, Jaggy, of course. So we have Jaggy brand, and Jaggy is, of course, 100% Arabica coffee. So we have that. And I would like to use that. So what I can do, so I would say this is the coffee, and the coffee, I get 1 coffee, which is actually wrong, because I would like to get, or if I say coffees get, I would expect a collection or list of coffees, but this is easier to implement or for a session. So what I would like to do is to inject the roaster, and the roaster should return ready to use coffee. Return. So we have the roaster roast, it looks good. The roaster roast coffee, and what we could do right away, right now, is stateless. And what stateless does, it becomes an EJB, or it stands for Enterprise Jakarta bean, of course. And it is a more lightweight and a way better, more scalable and easier to use than the old Enterprise Java beans. So, by the way, for us, this is exactly the same, but the name is different, so we can just rebrand it. So, but what happens behind the scenes is transaction is going to be started, and the instances are going to be reused, which is good. But if EJBs will die, it will be very easy to port to CDI with, for instance, transactional request scope. I would expect to introduce an stereotype with name not stateless, rather than how we could call it pooled, for instance, or a boundary would be nice, you know. But this is, yeah, boundary would be actually really nice. So, but let's save it. So so those were the first component, and if with a little bit of luck, we could actually see whether it works. And it works. So we got Arabica, true name, and Jaggy. So, or Jugi or Jaggy is the question, how to pronounce the mascot. But as you can see, another convention of a configuration without even thinking. I can find, I can just point to my microservice. On that note, what I would like to do is just to see whether it actually works. I get Swagger and OpenAPI for free. So as you can see, I get schemas, and the coffee is an object and has two properties, string and boolean, and there is actually nothing to set up. So it works out of the box. Now, at this point, I would just hack with Microprofile, but what I'm actually doing in projects is I introduce, let's say, setup Java project. So do I have it as well? Exactly. And the name is a wrong directory. So again, setup Java project, and the name is coffee st. And ST stands for system test. The question is why I choose strange name system tests, and the answer is because I'm involved in project with other consultants in large companies, and they always challenge me with names. So if you search for system tests and Wikipedia, system testing, you will find a definition, and this definition fits pretty well with this definition of my system test. So if someone, please don't rewrite Wikipedia, because then I will have, to change all the names. But they are based on Wikipedia. Why I'm doing that? Because of Parkinson law of triviality. And the Parkinson law of triviality, this law says but let's go with the Wikipedia definition. It says that the more trivial something is, the more discussion it generates. So for that purpose, I use SD for system tests. And the reason is because it's defined in Wikipedia and it's easy to access and quasi-standard. Now, so my project was created, and I could, of course, create it in NetBeans as well. But in some project, there is no NetBeans. So I will have to also do something. And this is the plain Maven archetype, which needs some deletions or cleanup. So Jax RS, I need Jax RS dep. And this is the Jersey dependencies, the standards. I also have a set for CXF if I'm using with using OpenLiberty or RestEasy with Whitefly. But the point is, you could do whatever you like. You will see in a second why I need it. So, and packaging jar, and what I don't need is the URL. And the name is obsolete. For instance, the name, if you think about this, is absolute superfluous, because the name is already the name of the war. So the only thing which matters is artifact ID. And if I would choose different name, it will cause confusion, because I would see in IDE the name would be different than the folder, and why to do this? So rely on convention over configuration. So what I will also need, I think is not defined here, is JUnit. And I still use the old JUnit, and the question why is because it's good enough, and I don't have to specify plugins, so it's easier for me. So I will just use that. So I don't have to specify the scope test, because the whole thing is a test. Now I'm in the JUnit project, and the name of the app test should be actually, wait a second. So this should be Coffee's Resource IT for integration tests. And this is another convention from Maven. It says all integration tests ends with IT, and they are executed in different life cycle. So what I can easily do right now, I can say Maven fail-safe integration test, and it's going to be executed without any additional configuration, no plugin configuration. So in my Java E or Jakarta E and Microprofile project, there are absolutely no plugins. We don't need any plugins. So now we have this. Now, what you can do first, init client, and the client is in the method before, and client builder new client, and the new client creates a client. And what I'm doing right now, it is the JAX-RS client API. And why I need so many dependencies here, and the reason for that is I'm outside a server, and therefore I need the API and the implementation, so-called SPI. On server, I don't need these dependencies. So I have this, and then this client target, And what the target was that. Where was this? Coffees. I still know it, but it's easier to copy this. So we have that. And the coffees is my target under test. So we have this. And now we can actually fetch coffee. Or I just call it CRUD at the beginning. Because yeah, it will, the name will change anyway. So request, and I would do it the right way. And the right way is I first expect a response, and the response, I need the status. This is the status. And what I would like to see is assert that status is 200. And now response read entity JSON object, and this is JSON P. It is in both. In JSON object, this JSON P specification comes with Java E or Jakarta 8 and Microprofile as well. And this is coffee. And I would just do this just to see whether it works. So, I forgot to specify the Java source, which, actually, here, let's go with 1.8, 1.5. So do it again. And now it uses JDK 1.8. So, it worked. So my system test was able to invoke my coffee. So now the question is, so first, again, no plugins, nothing. And because there are no plugins and the names are somehow usable, so what I usually will do is, or even now, I can switch to ST. And here I can say Maven failsafe integration test. And I know all my integration tests are executed. So the Jaggy was fetched. And with Maven clean install, they are not executed because it's different lifecycle. So without any configuration, I can fully rely on it. And in projects, I can even point to Maven failsafe integration test. Hopefully, I will find this website quickly. But this is like explanation, the conventions. Yeah. There were somewhere explained where the conventions are. You will find that. So this is like, it has to end with IT and or can start with IT, and then the test is going to be executed. And this failsafe integration test comes with Maven IT convention. Let's see whether we find that. Comes with that. So Maven is absolutely convention over configuration. Is there somewhere IT? No. But you get the point. Rely on conventions, and then there's no unexpected behavior, but because you should know how Maven works. So this is the idea. And you don't have to document that. So we have that. Now, the question is why I showed you the strange tests now, the system tests. First, in real life, this comes with a version or is versioned properly, and this as well. So if there are two modules and are not executed in one module, I can very easy test the backward compatibility, because I can re-execute the older tests against the newer specification and see whether it actually works. If both were in one module, this would be not possible or hard. I will have to check out the module twice and to achieve the same, which is somehow strange or not clear. And also, this module here is absolutely independent from this module. So this is the actual test. If I would execute the tests here, what may happen is that someone will probably reuse entities to get them serialized and deserialized, which won't happen in the microservice or cloud world. So, but let's see, we have a coffee shop. And the coffee shop is called Stardukes, of course. So there's no Starbucks in Brazil, it's just Stardukes. And the Stardukes would like to access the roastery to get some fresh coffee. So, and now the fun starts, because I would just like to reload that. I would like to make the microservices communicate. And how to do this would be the best would be the following. I have just a ping resource is good enough. Just rename the, let's just make it properly. So ping is going to be shop, coffee shop. And this was going to be a coffee shop resource. And this would be drinks. And should be coffees, but I will confuse both. So drinks is good enough. And let's say here coffees, and this is going to be string is okay. And now I get a coffee request class. Coffee requests, which is supposed to communicate with the other service. So now I already implemented this class. So this was even test-driven development, because I have this. So if I copy this and put it here, I'm almost done, except before. There's no before on the server, but we have post construct. And there is no test on the server. But what I can do, JSON object, I can just say return this. And assert does not make any sense here. And we are ready to go. Now the coffee shop injects the coffee request. In German it would be Koffer, like luggage request. So this was a funny one. So a typo. And request, and this can be returned. This request dot CRUD. So the name is strange. It's like fetch coffee. Now, and this is fetch coffee, right? And fetch coffee plus fetched from shop. So that this will serialize the JSON to or just will convert the JSON to string, and we see additional string just that you will see it comes over this via the service. So looks good. Now, if I will also mark it as stateless, the funniest, the good story is what happens behind the scenes now is there will be one instance of this because convention of a configuration from the server now, this coffee request or coffee request is going to be initiated once, and now this instance and this instance are like tied together. So there's one-to-one relation. We get exactly one coffee shop and exactly one coffee request, which saves some time. If this were request scoped, this would be reinitialized every time. Okay, so now Stardukes can be deployed again with what sh. And now we are living a little bit the microservice territory because I'm deploying 2 wars to 1 server, which is no more true in practice. In practice, we always have one-to-one relation, 1 server and 1 war. But let's see whether it actually works. So what I can do again, now curl HTTP localhost, and this was 8080 with Stardukes and resources drinks and drinks. And it worked. So we implemented in test-driven way service-to-service communication without any external dependencies. And what's nice, there are 5K. Why it's nice? First, so lots of companies starting to do in my project is scanning for problematic dependencies. And the cool story in my projects, I don't have any, so there is nothing to scan. So my projects always pass, the test because we don't have any external dependencies, for instance. And What's also nice is it is really quick. So if you are working with private Docker registries, which is always the case in the clouds, for instance, the deployment is really fast because the wars are tiny. So, okay, but with that, I can show you something interesting. So as you can see, I just have the status here, response, so I can show you something new. And this is at inject metric registry, and this is registry type, and the type is going to be application. So I would like to have the application registry, which is for business. There are metrics, and this is now microprofile specification. So, and now I would like to say here registry dot counter. And in this particular stage, I will look up the Open Matrix Cloud Native Foundation, or Prometheus. That's what I will do. Prometheus conventions, because I cannot remember them. Metric and label naming conventions. And this is explain what's the format, or what is the best practice to name, the metrics. But so I always have to look it up, but we have no time for that. So I will just try to do something sensible, like let's say coffee communication. And now what I can do, I will just concatenate the status and inc. So I have this. Now I would like to restart my call the Stadiux again, and yeah, just we can do this here. Matrix application. As you can see, you see application coffee communication 200 total 1. So drinks 2. So what we built an interesting metrics. What it said is, what it does is, it does the following. It says we have 200 HTTP status was executed twice. So now if I will, let's try something. So I could try to delete the war. Actually, I could manage to do this. Glassfish, domains, domain 1, auto deploy, and the first one was called coffee's war. So now it should be gone. So let's try to invoke the Stadiux again, and we see we get a strange error. And now with metric application, we see we have twice 200 and once 404. And what we could already do with Prometheus, and we could track that and create some alerts. We say, okay, we could try, to invoke the service which is actually not available. So on that note, we are already here. So what we learned, how to create a simple business metric and how to use it in production. So needless to say, most projects I see in real life, they don't care about metrics at all, which is a pity because no one knows what actually happens behind the scenes. And the more you distribute it, the more insight on metrics you will need. Okay, but let's see whether there are questions. Yeah, if you would like to have questions, just ask me a question. So there is nothing happens in chat, which is a very good thing because yeah, perfect. So now, what would I also, as a convention, I think this is covered. Time to hello world is unbeatable, I would say. With application server, you can start, you can reinstall the application server in 10 seconds. And start a project as I did. It's just the archetype is already there. So automation, small scripts, and consequent design is very important. So now we have microservices because we decided to use them. So we have Coffee and Stadiux. So now both microservices have to communicate with each other, of course. So now the first question will be in a project: can we share some jars? So this is from my perspective is you get the worst of both worlds. So you started with distribution, and you have a reason for that, and so now you try to tie them together with a shared jar. So I would say a way better would be, to merge them together and don't deploy multiple microservices if you don't have a need for that. So a monolith is always better than a set of microservices without a reason. Recently, I reviewed, I think, 30 microservices created by a small team, and for me, there was no obvious reason why they have so many microservices. Okay, so now we have that. But what we could do right now, as you can see, this fetch coffee is not very stable. So what I could do, I could say, but could you please retry a little bit and do the max retries, let's say 2 times, because 3 is default. So let's do that. And then here. So I will try it. Was a little bit longer. And we have more metrics now. As you can see, 404 was invoked 3 times. So if we do it again. So let's do the drinks first. And then the application. So 6 times. So it's 9 times because of the retries. But what you can also see, there were additional metrics I added. They came not from me, they came from the fault tolerance specification. And the fault tolerance specification, what it did is it added, calls, fails, total failed invocations were 3, and I got additional information what happens or what cause additional information about the retries right now. So, but what I could also do, I can say, okay, in case this does not work, I would like to have a fallback, and the fallback is method is like, T. And this is a really terrible fallback, but what we can do. The problem is I have absolutely no idea about T's, but let's try this. JSON create object builder and add T. What I know, there is a green T. So good enough. Build. So what happens now is I just will add some system on println. So let's see what happens. So now the drinks, we see T green, and the application has some more metrics because you see fallbacks was called once, total 3 times exactly, and there were no 200. Why not 200? Because it was not redeployed yet. So we can solve the problem by, and by the way, you see here the points. So this was retried 3 times. So if we just change to coffees again, or where is the what for the coffees? Here is coffee. Just enter, put enter, and nice. By the way, how many builds we had? 10 builds already. So we had 10 deployments during the session of the one service. So now do it again. And now the application, we see communication 200 total 1. So the 3 remains, but this was successful. So what this means, we can just use fault tolerance in metrics together, and you could actually override everything if you like with the microprofile config, which can be overridden with Docker or Kubernetes environment entries or deployment configs. Okay, so what we saw is that we actually were able to reuse one-to-one system tests, copy the test to another microservice. So we got a stub, both are decoupled. We called, we just used the status, created on-the-fly counters depending on status, and they should be visible immediately. So let's see. Set up Prometheus, and what it should do, just create a YAML file, because from my perspective, YAML are not that easy to write. Yeah. So let's, oh, this is already problematic here. So you have to be very cautious with the YAML. It's easy to read, not that easy to write. Wait a second. So 5 seconds, and this is okay. So it goes. So what this means is, this is configuration for Prometheus, which will poll every 5 seconds. A job name, coffee, no, Sue Java, of course. Then matrix application and localhost 8080. So we have that, and with that, I can just say Prometheus and just launch it with the configuration. And 9090 should be a port 9090. So let's go here, localhost 9090. Perfect. It was the first time I didn't forget the port. Usually, hard time with the ports. So, and the metrics are already available. Remember, what I did is I just pointed to the business metrics. But I could say, okay, what's interests me, for instance, is 200 total. Execute and 1 hour. So this is good. And if I will just curl, what was it? Stardukes. Wait a second. Stardukes. It's actually good name. Forgot my own, and I think the curl happened here. Yeah. This is what I'm searching for. Actually, fast typing will also help. So we have this again. And if I reload that, you will see it is actually working. So so now you see probably what it means. So if Jakarta is more like the basic operating system, and Microprofile, if you take a look on Microprofile or Microprofile, let's take a look on OpenMetrics. So OpenMetrics is emerging cloud native standard, and from Cloud Native Foundation, and it starts to standardize the text representation from Prometheus. And Microprofile supports that. Now, if you search, for instance, for OpenAPI, so it's also known as Swagger, it is also kind of a standard. And I don't know whether this is Cloud Native Foundation, but it was renamed to OpenAPI. And Swagger, is it CNCF? Might be. So we have to double check that. But this emerges to one standard, and also liveness and readiness probes, which are coming with Microprofile, is also a quasi standard because they come with Kubernetes. So what it means is, for me, Microprofile, what Microprofile implements has nothing to do with Java. It has something to do with cloud standards, which are directly implemented by Microprofile. And Jakarta is more like abstraction from vendors. So there are different vendors, like, for instance, JMS, JDBC is not exactly Jakarta, but Java, and we have REST, like RestService, and this is like the basic operating system, and Microprofile is the implementation of native standards, and this is why they fit both really well together. Okay, so we have both. Let's double check whether there are some questions. There are no questions, which is very good or really bad. So probably the stream is already broken, but it looks good in my so we have a few minutes left. So we have focus on task. What it means is, what's really important for me is to find out the vision of the application or the task, what we would like to solve. So in my particular case, the Stardukes or coffee, we would like to expose what? Management of coffees. Is it a coffee roastery? And what it actually does. And if you know it from then, you should just use apply clarity. And what clarity means is, for instance, clear naming. What I would expect in such a project, that the top level packages here are all named after domain concepts. So I would allow to have packages here like inside coffee, like, you know, what do we have? Let's say roaster, or coffee machine, or mugs, or even t-shirts for sale, or t-shirts for sale. They will be like products. But what I think is not necessary, to name packages after, you know, technical stuff, like, for instance, mappings, mappers, transformers, factories, foundation, domain, whatever, pointless names. Why that? Because what I think what will happen is, after a few iterations, the project will be more mature. You will switch the projects or do something else in another project, then come back, and if you see, you know, proper names, then you can you will, for instance, you get a user story or use case about coffee, and you will find a coffee here. We'll open the coffee, and we'll find whatever is coffee related. But I don't think you get a user story, just change exception, or add additional mapping. So this is not that likely. It's all about likelihood. So, and the most important thing is, keep it simple and stupid, and you aren't gonna need it. So both also you will find on Wikipedia. Why it is important. So we actually did this, right? So we started the project without super POMs. Why that? We only have 2 dependencies. If you have 2 dependencies, it is pointless to extract, you know, diversions to somewhere else, because this will change, you know, once a year, and this will change in real world project probably just also once a year, because you probably won't, you know, update all your microservices all the time, but you could. But yeah, in worst case, this will change 4 times a year. And if this changes 4 times a year, I don't need to extract that in a super POM. So also, I can still define here plugins and whatever I like, but these plugins and all the stuff can be also done later. So it's not necessary in a project to do it right now. So we have that. And so this is keep it simple and stupid. Also, let's say exception handling, for instance. What we can do, where is my coffee? So here's my coffee. And let's just show you this here. So let's assume I will have exception, throw new illegal state exception. And let's call that, or not that, too late for a pink exception. And this is by. So I have the exception, which is, let's say, runtime exception. And the runtime exception does that. Message. So now, if I start this and completely wrong, it should be coffee's resources pink. So can it be compiled? Pink was good, and coffee, not coffees. Okay. So try it again. It was coffee, not coffees. Resources pink. And now I got 500 internal server error with the message, which is okay. But what, let's say, too late for a pink, is actually a business error. So what I would expect, not 500, rather than 400 bad requests. You know, you are too late for this request. So, and what I see a lot in projects, they try, you know, to extract it. And we are in the lucky situation, the exception happens here. But if the exception would be hidden behind dependency exception, dependency injection, developers would try to extract the exception or create exception mappers. So they try to extract the exception too late. So what I will do here, for instance, instead of inheriting from runtime exception, I could inherit from web application exception. And now I can say, okay, now I'm in the web mode. So I can say response status, let's say 400, and header this info session is going to be too long build. Okay, looks good. So if I retry that, we see bad request, info session is going to be too long. So this for me is more explicit because I see, okay, this is the web application exception. It maps itself into HTTP status code, so I don't need an external enum to map that. And this is simple enough, and then it can very easily extend it or catch it if I really like. So this was exception handling. On that note, what's also not allowed in my project, if I have the power, to prohibit that, are all kinds of interfaces or factories. Because actually, microservice world, no one cares what you're doing inside the application, as long as the REST API is clean. And in this particular case, for instance, my exception is not well designed because it depends on JAX-RS. But my whole microservice depends on JAX-RS. It's not like I can say, okay, later I will switch back to Corba. This is extremely unlikely. So I can, for instance, this dependency is not nice, but is good enough. Okay, I think there is a question. No, false alarm. Okay, so it means everything is crystal clear what happens here. So we covered communication between microservice, a couple of microprofile APIs, and system tests. And it was hello world, but I think on that, so this is how my more complicated project look like. And but these projects they are complicated because of the business logic and not because of technology. So we have far more packages here, and all the packages are structured the same way. Boundary is the API to the outside world. Entity is the data. It can be transient or persistent with JPA or JNoSQL, of course. And the boundary usually comprises a RESTful service to the outside world or WebSocket, for instance. And this REST service points to a class which is more or less a facade, and this facade comes with pure business logic without any pollution with JAX-RS annotations. So the idea is the coffee resource and roaster are actually one unit, and they are only split to make them easier to test, to unit test. And what you can also do, you can, for instance, apply, let's say, timed annotation on business, on key business methods. And if I perform, what was it? This was the coffee roaster. Coffee, and this was coffees, yes. So this was invoked, and now let's try the metrics. We should find here another performance metric, and we see that the roast method was invoked once with some performance metrics which can be accessed from Prometheus. And Prometheus is the data source, and Grafana you would usually choose to have prettier diagrams. So I think I covered a lot. So if you're interested, we can meet us again with the same infrastructure on Airhacks TV. But if I invoke that, it will end in endless loop, because here comes the streaming, and the internet will probably end, I guess. Let's see what happens. So this should be the current stream. Still black. Oh, I see myself in 10 minutes ago. If I will click this, so it works. So we can meet us here if you're interested. Airhacks FM is the podcast. Before you listen to something, the only allowed episode for now is with Bruno Souza, the Java man. And if you like, there's Scott McNeely and James Gosling as well. So we have this, and I think I never had attendees from Brazil. I had attendees from all over the world. So if you like, attend the workshops. This winter, they are in Munich, so way too far from Brazil. But I think this time I still get attendees from whole Europe. And there was one chief architects. They will be from even Nigeria. So attendees from all over the world. So thank you for watching, and thank you a lot for the invitation. And enjoy, enjoy how to call it, lean. Microprofile and Jakarta E. So thank you and bye.